Hello, gorgeous humans. My name is Tanya Eva. I am a trauma-informed internal family systems therapist, human design, and Gene Keys guide. Now, I do consider myself more of a coach because I really do believe that my biggest strength is in activating people into their highest timeline and really helping them connect back to their emotions, really seeing the spaces and the places and the unfelt feelings and the unseen, parts of themselves that they're not fully in relationship with. And so internal family systems, human design, and Gene Keys are some of the modalities that I use to really support my clients in getting back in touch with their true self and really accessing those gift frequencies in Gene Keys, as Richard Rudd would say. Because for most of my life, I spent most of my life trying to escape my life, trying to avoid responsibility, very, very disassociated from my own body and from my own soul path. And that caused a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of heartbreak. And I spent many of my 20s super confused, super hard on myself. My inner critic was just relentless. And it really wasn't until I discovered and really went, deep into my own healing journey. And the reason I prefer coaching over therapy is that, don't get me wrong, therapy is extremely supportive and helpful, but I think a lot of people can get stuck there. And so my gift is really in activating your energy channels and really getting you moving and knowing that, now is the time. Now you're ready right now to live your life how you're designed and meant to live it if you do the work. So the reason I'm really inspired to do this video today is because I was thinking about how much I've changed my story over the years. And, on my healing journey, I had a lot to work through. I come from a very dysfunctional family system. There was a lot of narcissistic abuse. And I realized where I was getting stuck the most, and this was reflected back to me by many people, was my story. I was really, really kind of attached and obsessed with telling this story that really validated that I was right in life. And that was keeping me stuck. It was actually keeping me really unhappy too, because I was like, yeah, I can be right, but what does that at the end of the day do for me? Absolutely nothing. It wasn't contributing to my experience, having a better experience of life. It wasn't contributing to my fulfillment, to my, I was becoming lazy. I was becoming like just a person that I didn't actually know. And I was like, how have I accumulated all this knowledge? Like I have so much knowledge to share and actually wisdom to share and service to offer. And I was really still stuck in these shadow frequencies, which I'm going to share with you more about Gene Keys in this video. And I've really come to a place where I'm moving into my gift frequencies, and it's really, really supported me in changing my story. And so now I can catch myself in an old story really, really fast. And that's been through the support of Gene Keys specifically. And that's what I really want to share with you. I'm going to take you through my profile and how I was telling an old story through my shadow frequencies and how I'm now telling a new story through my gift frequencies. Now, Gene Keys can get really complicated really fast. So all I want you to remember today is that there is a shadow frequency, a gift frequency, and a Siddhic frequency. And there are 64 Gene Keys. And I would like you to think of them as archetypes that we all have access to. We all have access to every 64 archetypes, but we each have a unique soul blueprint, which is kind of how human design and Gene Keys works, that we all have a unique design. And that is why we're all like 1 in a billion, right? Like we're all super unique. But it's in no way, shape, or form meant to limit you in life. And the only thing that I've seen with things like Gene Keys and human design is that people can start to feel limited because they're stuck in a story or in a dogmatic way of thinking. And I don't want to perpetuate that here. I'm really interpreting this in my own unique way, in the ways that have supported me through my own contemplations. And so I'm sharing it with you so that you can start to contemplate your own profile, the story that you're telling in your life, and how you could move from like that story that's not really serving you to really creating a story that's creating a life and an experience of life that really is ecstatic and absolute rapture. So let's get right into it. I'm going to share my screen. And so this is what the Gene Keys profile looks like. And I know it looks very complicated right now. There are a lot of words, a lot of lines, a lot of pathways. But to simplify it for you, I'm going to walk you through the 3 pathways individually and the old stories that I was living out, and how I'm really creating a new story for my life. So there's the activation sequence, which is really all about your life's purpose. And I have a very unique perspective on life purpose that I'm going to share with you. Venus sequence, which is all about relationships. It's about opening your heart. And it's really, this is where the magic happens. This is where, you really start to connect to people, and just the relationships that you have with yourself, your experience of life really starts to flower. And the Pearl sequence is really about money, and not so much money as in the form of cash, but in the form of prosperity, in the form of not even so much abundance. It's really what you're here to do. It is an initiation into action. It's really about starting to offer your gifts and really being of service, and then creating cash flow through that then creates prosperity for not only yourself, but everybody around you. I just got goosebumps. It's a beautiful, beautiful pathway. But I'm going to start off in the activation sequence, which is really about your life's purpose. And this is probably the bulk of the work for most people, because once you get this kind of, I don't want to say right, but once you start to feel the flow of these energetic states, and you can start to transmute the shadow into the gift yourself through your own contemplations, maybe working with a guide like myself, then everything else kind of starts to unlock. And to give you a really high level overview, this is the activation sequence, and you can see it goes like this. Then the Venus sequence kind of continues on from that. And it's like this pathway, right? And it's just beautiful. So it's like your life's purpose to your relationships, opening your heart, and then your prosperity. So it looks complicated, but really it's designed to be so simple and to really simplify your life. So I want to share with you my take on purpose and how the activation sequence has really, really supported me in tapping into the gift frequencies of my purpose. And for so long, I spent many years in that same conversation of like, what is my purpose? I don't know what I'm here to do. And I was doubling down on things that I had spent my entire 20s. I come from a corporate marketing background. I, studied marketing and business at university. And I really loved my career in marketing. I started off in brand marketing, working for media agencies. And then I worked for 5 years at an online dating company. And it was very high performance. And we really worked with Facebook ads, and we were managing huge amounts of money, like, $1 to $2 million a month ad spend at this company. And so it was heavily focused on Facebook ads and just generating as many leads as possible a day. And I loved my role there. I loved the work that I was doing, but my spiritual journey started to unravel in ways. I'm one of those people who, when they get really comfortable, is like, what's next? Comfort is not really my friend. I think that safety and security is always a a great place to start. But comfort starts to make me anxious because I'm like, life's too short to be comfortable. I think we can have seasons of comfort. But if I'm there too long, then I start to feel like I'm not tapping into the higher potential of my DNA. And I can feel that on a very visceral level in my body. Actually, my body starts to shut down. It starts to tell me and talk to me. So I really loved my roles there, and I was very much in my purpose. And that's what I want to be clear about, because I was kind of from this perspective of like, well, this is not my life purpose. When really all along, I was actually living my purpose at that time. But this is where the conversation around life purpose, I think, has been really twisted, in that we think that there's this one purpose that we're supposed to be here for. And it's not true. Purpose is actually an energetic state. It's what energy are you bringing to this moment here right now? What most people are searching for is their vocation, which we're going to get into because that's part of the Pearl sequence. Your vocation is what you're here to do. And it's that thing, I just got goosebumps again. It's that thing that is like your genius zone, that only you can do the way that you can do. And it's the place that you provide the most value. It's the place that you feel the most fulfillment. And that's what people are confusing with purpose. And they're actually two different things, because you can have a sense of purpose right here, right now, but you've got to activate that within yourself. You've got to bring the energy. You can come at your purpose half-heartedly, or you can come at it with pure devotion in the moment. And so when I understood that through Gene Keys, I was like, oh, I can have a purpose right here, right now. I don't have to suffer searching for my purpose, because I was so stuck there. What I was searching for was actually my vocation. And what your purpose does, the activation sequence, this is why it's a pathway, is that when you really activate the gift frequencies of your activation sequence, they will lead you to your vocation. They have to. It's like magic, but you can only experience it for yourself. So the activation sequence are these 4 green circles here. So you've got your life's work, you've got evolution, you've got your radiance, and you've got your purpose. Now, life's work is about 70% of your life's work, of your profile. Like, if you can master this energy, you've pretty much unlocked like the whole thing. But yeah, it's your life's work. It's what you're here to do. So life's work and evolution are what you're here to do, the energy you're here to bring. Radiance and purpose. Your radiance is really about your health. It's about environment, and it's about health, your just overall kind of health and well-being. And your purpose is really about your being, like who you're here to just be. So these two are your beingness, and these are your doingness, what you're here to do. Now, I want to share with you the story that I was carrying of the shadow frequencies through my activation sequence. And if you haven't already, you can download your profile, your Gene Keys profile, for free at genekeys.com/free profile. You just need your birthday, your exact birth time. I recommend your exact birth time. It gives you the most accurate reading, and the place that you were born. And you will get a free profile exactly like this. So the story that I was telling through the shadow frequencies of each of these spheres, and I want to also see these pathways here, they're also important to look at, because this challenge pathway is probably going to be your biggest life challenge. It's going to be the thing that when you master this, that's when everything else starts to unlock. So they all play a vital role. But this is your life's challenge. The breakthrough is when you unlock the evolution part of your sphere. You really get the breakthrough that you're really searching for, to really lock in your purpose, like who you're here to be. And I think, often we spend a lot of time trying to do, like trying to get this right. And it's kind of like you can reverse it, because who you're here to be is like, this is your purpose. And they work together. So I'm going to share with you how it unfolded for me as a shadow story. So I used to live, and I'm going to kind of work backwards. So I used to live on the Gold Coast, which is a small coastal town. And it absolutely suited my my design. I am actually built for an environment of shores where the ocean meets the land, or where rivers meet the land, or where water meets the land. This is where my radiance comes alive. It's the correct environment for me, and also in like urban areas where there's just a little bit more going on. And so my radiance and I'm not going to go into the lines. See how there's a line 3 interaction here, line 1 creator. That I could be here all day. So I'm just going to talk about the numbers. So the sphere. So Gene Key 29, Gene Key 30, Gene Key 8, and Gene Key 14. So I was really living my purpose on the Gold Coast. And when I was, working for the online dating company, even though I was very much in my, I actually was in the gift frequency. I was very competent at my job, which is this competence. I had a sense of style. Now, this Gene Key 8 it's really about authenticity. Gene Key 8 is about authenticity, but the shadow frequency of it is really caring so much what people think. But I kind of had activated the gift of that, and I was really, just living an authentic life from the state of awareness that I had at the time. So I was competent in my job. I definitely felt a sense of style and a sense of like my life wasn't mediocre. I wasn't so much battling with my mediocrity or my self-expression with the awareness that I had. And so I really was living my purpose at the time. I was really in that gift frequency. Now, the doing part, there was definitely a sense of lightness. So there was a sense of lightness, and there was a sense of commitment. So actually, I was living my purpose, even though I was a very unawakened being, meaning I was very disassociated from my body. I was kind of in a routine that really supported my energy. But again, I just was living life very unconsciously. I was very mean to myself internally. I actually had no relationship to my feelings or emotions. I just felt like a victim of everything else around me. So even though I was living my purpose and I was doing all the right things, I felt like a victim of my circumstances. And I felt as if, when in hindsight, as if life was happening to me versus me having control of my own destiny. And this is where the awakening happens. So it's like you can be living your purpose even as an unawakened being, even as somebody who's not, super conscious or in touch with their emotions or feelings, or, what their vocation in life. So that's what I want to be really clear about. But these energetic states, commitment, lightness, style, competence, these are things that you will take with you no matter what vocation you do, no matter where you go, no matter what job you have, no matter what situation, even if you're a stay-at-home mom, these are the energies that you will bring to motherhood, to your career, to your relationships. So this is why the activation sequence is like it's a starting point, because if you can transmute and embrace the shadow frequencies and turn them into gifts, then you're in your purpose. It's not about so much what you're doing or what job you're doing or what your circumstances are. It's the energetic state. It's like a presence, and it's again the being. So the beingness, the radiance, and the purpose, and the doing. Now, the biggest challenge here, so how I was living out the shadow story though, was that the challenge here was I very much desired certain things that were not qualified by God, not qualified by my higher self. They were shadow desires, things like climbing the corporate ladder, earning six figures by the time I was 30. That was a desire I had, and I've reached that desire. At 28, I was earning six figures. I was living by the beach. I'd fulfilled that shadow desire, but I was so miserable and unhappy. And so the shame, the guilt set in, the things that I just felt like, how can this be happening? I've just spent my entire life building this career, creating this life for myself. And I just felt so unhappy, so unfulfilled, to the point where my entire body shut down. I had a nervous breakdown, and I was really struggling with depression. But for me, it wasn't a mental thing. It was a spiritual depression. It was a like, I'm not in touch with these childlike parts of me that I knew were there. And so I was very much had these shadow desires that had no qualification. There wasn't a lightness about them, right? There wasn't a lightness or a rapture. Rapture is like that. It's just like total excitement. Like, I'm just like, ooh, which is how I feel about, sharing this with you. There wasn't that energetic state to it. It was very much a shadow story that I was living. And I had so many desires. I wanted so many things. I felt a lot of shame around wanting more. The story that kept playing was like, why can't you just be grateful for what you have? And I did focus on that for a little while. I think a lot of the personal development, there's, even all the journals that I see like on Amazon, it's all about gratitude. And I'm like, yes, but I was already grateful. So I was like, I'm already grateful though. Like I've worked my ass off. The choices that I've made to get to where I am, like, I'm like, I'm grateful already. And I just felt a lot of shame around wanting something different, wanting something more. And that's where the breakthrough comes in. The breakthrough is this authenticity gene key. And this is my story, guys, right? So your story is going to be different, but I'm just showing you how this played out in my life using my profile. The mediocrity, I started to feel the style and the exquisiteness. Was like, I didn't realize how much I cared what other people thought of me and how I lived my life in terms of, who I was hanging around, what choices I made in terms of career, work, vocation, things like that. I cared so much and I had no idea. I thought that I was like one of the most authentic people I knew. I just thought I was really real, down to earth. And there was parts of me that were that, but because of my childhood traumas, there was so many, that the mediocrity that I was experiencing was like, I'm actually trying so hard to be different that I'm just like everybody else. I'm actually not even trying. I'm not even being myself. Mediocrity can be like, it's like mediocrity, but it's like almost like you're trying so hard to be different that you just become not different. You just become a tryhard or somebody who's like, doing things because they think that it's cool and seen as cool by everybody else. So I didn't realize how much I cared. And my breakthrough happened when I really got okay with following my rapture, things that excited me. And you would be surprised how difficult that truly was. And because I also come from a culture, my parents are Croatian, and it used to be a communist country. It was very much about hard work, education, and just put your head down and just work hard and do what you're supposed to do. And it was just that very militant way of looking at the world and just very oppressed. And so I was oppressing my own self. And even to this day, my parents would have no idea like what I'm doing. They'd just be like, what? Like, you went to university, like, they just would not understand. So it was really this pathway of like committing to what really excites me and then not caring what people think about it. Oh my God, this took me years, guys. This took me years. And now I'm saying I didn't have this. I didn't have Gene Keys back then. So I'm becoming more aware of it now. Like I am aware of it now. But these modalities can really support you when you contemplate them in your life. They will unlock things for you. And so I wish I had this many years ago, but I didn't. But I'm now seeing in hindsight the shadow story that was playing out. And it took me years to heal this, to really break through that challenge of committing to what really excites me, not caring what people think about it, really living an authentic life. And then really coming into my purpose, which is who I'm here to be. It's like I don't even have to try. It's just who I am. And that is this gift of competence, which is like, this is what I think many of us are looking for, because competence can come from you putting your head down and working really hard, which is what I felt like in my old career. It was like there were parts of me that were like kind of good at it. I advanced my career, but it was hard work. It was very analytical, logical, mathematical kind of work. And I just knew deep down in my core, I'm like, this is not right. I'm not actually a very logical person. I'm actually very driven by my feelings, by my emotion, by my intuition. I was driven by all these feminine qualities because I'm a woman. And we live in a world that's driven by male logic, which again is not wrong. It just I wasn't being the competence, the bounteousness. Bounteousness is really about generosity. It's about that thing when you give so much, but it energizes you back. I didn't have that. It was like the more I worked, the harder I worked, I'd get like migraines at the end of the day because of I was trying so hard. And it was like, yeah, I'm just naturally competent, but it's so hard. And I'd get migraines, and like, your body would tell you. Whereas when I'm doing things like this, it just feels like I'm giving from generosity, and it energizes me in return. And I think that this is where business and where vocation and things are heading. It has to also fulfill us. And I think that we're so lucky to live in an age where this is a possibility for all of us. So really, when I look at it, I was compromising. I was compromising on the things that I really desired again. And so compromise are it's the internal compromise. It's not so much about people pleasing, it's not that. I think people pleasing is really overdone. It's the compromise that I was internally compromising on the things that I knew were going to make me live out my purpose in the most, to the highest service and highest good of all. So, so that's kind of how the shadow frequency played out in my old life, in my old story. And so that was a real challenge, and that took me many, many, many years. And I only now feel like I'm coming to a place of like total acceptance that I'm now living my purpose, even though I'm not exactly where I want to be. And I know that there's just so much more unfolding, but I have this tool and I have this awareness, and it's transformed my life. So now we're going to get into relationships. Now, this was probably the most painful part. This is the most challenging part for most people. And this is probably where most people stop. This is where most people, it just probably gets too overwhelming. Maybe there's too much pain. Maybe there's denial. Maybe there's all these ego defenses that really stop us from opening our heart and healing our wounds from the past. But it is the most fulfilling journey that I've ever taken. So I'm going to share with you how the shadow frequencies played out in my life through my relationships. Now, this is a fun one. And then how it leads also again into the pearl, into your prosperity. Because once you open your heart, guys, if you live your life from an open heart, there is no other way than for you to bring prosperity to your life and to the lives of others. But your heart has to be open. It has to be encompassing and in reverence of all life. And I just think that this is the place that, if you're here watching this is the kind of world and businesses and circulation of wealth and money and just people living in their highest state. This is really kind of the pathway to that for you in your own life, and then emanating that out and being the change you wish to see. I love that quote. Yeah. So, okay. So the Venus sequence is about relationships, and it's about healing and opening the heart. Now, it's also connected to your purpose, which is just who you be. And it really resonates. So this one really resonated for me because I just feel like I'm just an extremely generous person. That's the Leo in me. I'm just really warm-hearted. I can just give and give and give. And like I have no end to my well of generosity. But it's when I drop into the compromise where I'm like compromising my own internal values, my own internal desires. When I'm compromising that, then I will naturally hurt who I be in the world. And that's really hard for me. That was really hard for me as a woman too, because women for the last century or more have lived in a state of compromise to their desires, period. And there's reasons for that, right? Like it was based on survival. But we're born to thrive, and I'm living in this time space period right now. And so I am not here to compromise. So, and I know that. So I'm living in my purpose. But much of my life was unconscious, and I was compromising on what I truly wanted. Because if I'm being real, like a corporate office job is totally out of alignment with who I am. I have a very energetic consciousness, like a stream of energy. I'm just like, I need to exercise every day. That's how much I wake up with, just like energy bursting through the seams. So I need to exercise to almost like relax my nervous system. And then my mind, the way my mind works, it just like darts left and right and fast. And so if I'm too concentrated on something, it takes away from my joy. And that's not to say, I also love concentrating and learning and teaching, but I need to be careful that my lifestyle then also balances that. So yeah, there are many things that I compromised on. And so really, and again, if we're talking about relationships, not just career, but relationships, I made many compromises in certain relationships. But the thing about that is, which is, see this pathway here, which is your Dharma. So your Dharma, it is another word for purpose again, but it's much more like, it's much deeper than that. It's like your Dharma, it's like your purpose in relationships. And it's really what you're here to, it's that attraction point. And my attraction sphere of 32 is actually, it's very connected to ancestry. It's very connected to, it's kind of like, it's very connected to success or failure, like the idea of success or failure. And it's connected to my, it's a very ancestral gene key. But you can see the shadow frequency is failure. And the gift is preservation, which is really about what's preserving what is essential. And so for me, one of those things is family. Family is something that is absolutely essential to me. It's like essential for my well-being. Whether I'm in a intimate relationship, whether it's marriage, I'm not married right now, but I am in an intimate relationship. And but it's not about that. It could be about tribe. It could be about family in terms of community. If I have that, then I'm in a point of attraction. That's me in my gift of preservation, of preserving, that that, yeah, what is essential to me. And then veneration is about deep respect. It's like a reverence for all of life. Gene Key 22 is all about grace and like a deep reverence for life. Veneration is it's similar, but it's like maybe more, it's like a deep respect for your ancestry. Maybe that's how I want to interpret it. And it's interesting because me and my partner, who I have chosen to devote my life to, I have a very deep respect for him. And I didn't really see how in the past certain people I was choosing to be in relationship with wasn't really a relationship. Many of them just were toxic situationships. I had very little self-esteem and self-worth. And they were total failures. Not them, just the situation was just a total failure. And so that's how the story played out. The relationships just failed miserably. There was no respect both ways, probably. And I'm not going to get into the lines, but they were very much lust driven. So it was really all about survival, and that is why they all failed miserably. But now that I have chosen a partner who I am passionately in love with, who I have a deep respect for, this is where the healing starts to happen. This is where you start to create really good karma in your life, because it's who you are with, who you spend your time with. So this is why it's called attraction, because it's who you're attracting into your life, but you have to know yourself, right? Because like, even though my past relationships failed miserably, I knew that my gift of preservation and my deep respect for ancestry, my ancestral lineage, and that of the other person that I'm in relationship with deeply matters. And so the healing starts to begin, the attraction point, when you get to know that about yourself. Every person that comes into your life, you start to feel that resonance with, or there is no resonance, and that's okay. So that's the attraction point, but that's how the shadow frequency played out. Now the karma, this is the pathway of karma, and this is where you can really start to create your destiny in a way, right? Like, this is who you be, who you're attracting into your life. And if you get these things wrong, it creates bad karma, which is really what I talk about. It's really, my whole thing here is about healing your karma. And I had really bad karma, especially just the amount of heartbreak, the amount of pain and tears. Like, it took so many failures for me to learn the lesson too. I think now my relationship to failure is different. If something fails, I immediately learn the lesson. I'm like, I see it. I know how and why it happened, but it rarely happens as often. In terms of in relationships, I can catch it straight away. Whereas before, I had to have, the same thing happen over and over and over again before I woke up, before I really started to take a radical responsibility for my part and really getting to know myself at the core of who God designed me to be. So this is where you start to create, this is the karma. Now your IQ sphere is your teenage years. It's everything from 14 to 21. And it's your teenage years. And if you can think of your IQ as like, if you think of it's like where that energetic state, maybe where you started to develop this frequency, and how the shadow frequency of it started to affect your experience of life when you were a teenager. And mine is so funny because it is the shadow frequency of seriousness. And that is just so true for me, because I was so serious as a teenager. And I just hold so much compassion for my younger teenage self, because I had so much trauma. I was so oppressed, and I just felt so, life was just really serious. And so my best friend was actually extremely funny. She was very, very humorous. at the time, that relationship also ended up being a big failure. But she was a narcissist, so had a lot of healing to do around that. But she was my best friend for nearly 13, 14 years. And she was able to transmute that seriousness vibe that I had in my teenage years. And it really turned into like delight, because our friendship was just, it was beautiful for what it was, at the level of awareness that I was at. We're both very codependent on each other. And probably had very similar traumatic childhoods in terms of like emotional neglect and not really having those wise elders that we could turn to, and having the proper we were just total opposites in that my story was very oppressive and hers was like she had so much freedom that she didn't know how to manage that freedom. It was almost like she was looking for structure in masculine container. And so my seriousness and like my mother kind of compassionate way, or like my warm and my sense of loyalty and my codependence in that, the shadow parts, really, we just kind of, our wounds just kind of merged together, and created some of these, shifted some of this, seriousness. But when I look at me on my own without, any of that, I was just very serious. There was not a lot of delight. And there was definitely no ecstasy. And so, yeah, my teenage years were pretty difficult, I would say. There was a lot of fun in there too, a lot of good memories, but a lot more shame and sadness and seriousness. And I'm not going to get into the lines because we could just go here forever. But this between the IQ and the EQ is the pathway of intelligence. Now, this is probably the same level of importance as the pathway of challenge between in your purpose, your life's work, and your evolution. It's got the same kind of energetic importance in terms of like, once you can really transmute and embrace this shadow and turn it into delight, you unlock your emotional intelligence. Now, your emotional intelligence, these are your teenage years from 14 to 21. This IQ represents from 8 to 14 or 7 to 14. So they go in 7-year periods. From 7 to 14, it's kind of like where it develops, like where you start to see it manifest in certain ways in your life. And I mean, this just couldn't be truer for me. Like, and this is the lines are important. Mine, it's really about your self-esteem. This is kind of really where your self-esteem starts to get locked in. And how your self-esteem starts to manifest out into the world. So if you think of a child from like 7 to 14, that's kind of like they're a child, but they're a teenager, and it's like everything in between. And their personality is now created. And so, yeah, it's really about self-esteem. But it's also about emotional intelligence. So if you think of how you manage your emotions and what it does to your heart space, to your relationships. And if you, so for example, Gene Key 40, it's actually called the gate of aloneness. And Gene Key 40 is, it's funny because I've always actually been very happy being alone, not lonely, just happy being alone. And what I've realized is that this shadow frequency of exhaustion, I probably was a parentified child. I wouldn't say to the extent as maybe some people, but there was definitely a level of emotional caretaking for my parents, because they didn't take care of their emotions, and emotions were something that were not accepted at all. Emotions, period, definitely not negative emotions, but emotions in general, just not discussed, it's just completely suppressed and repressed immediately. And so the exhaustion part of my old story was me emotionally caretaking for everybody else around me and not actually going within and caretaking my own. And so I didn't realize that I was just constantly exhausted. And my self-esteem manifested as meanness. But I was so repressed and suppressed that I was also manifesting it as kindness. But again, when you're that young, when you look back on your life, I was like, yeah, there were many moments that I was kind, but it was all in this shadow frequency of exhaustion. I was just taking care of other people's emotions, and I had no idea that I could also take care, and I should be taking care of my own. And that's kind of where the gift of resolve comes in. I started to resolve my own emotional world. And this is, and when you're looking back at, because I'm 33 now. So when I'm looking back, it's not just that, oh, this was only from when I was 7 to 14. It's like, no, this is when it manifested, but this plays out in your life today. So I can easily, if I'm emotionally caretaking too much, other people's emotions, I'm exhausted. I get exhausted. That just puts me in my shadow frequency. And that will make me almost go mean. It's a manifestation of our self-esteem. But if I can find resolve and really have really strong boundaries around where my emotions start and where theirs start and end and where mine start and end, then I'm in a state of resolve. Now I can really access this divine will. Divine will is like, it's just like this, when you have this moment of like total resolve, divine will, it's in the ego center, in your human design. And it's about like, you just do it from the willingness of your own heart. It doesn't feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like a burden. It doesn't exhaust you. It comes from divine will. And so this is where boundaries start to really come in. And I know because I've when my boundaries are leaky, then I get exhausted emotionally. And the same with, the teenage mind. If I don't have boundaries around my self-expression, around my mind and my intelligence of like how I see the world, maybe this is where my brilliant mind, my provocative mind comes in. I can get really serious. So I need to have boundaries around how I'm expressing that and my emotions, which then leads me to love, the pathway of love. This is probably my favorite because I'm just a big ball of love. I'm a Leo, y'all. But the SQ is really from 0 to 7. It's kind of where this starts to manifest and where your highest spiritual intelligence is. And so mine is Gene Key 16. And the shadow frequency is indifference. The gift is versatility, and the acidic state is mastery. Now, indifference is something that I can definitely, it was a story that was playing out. The truth was, and a lot of this pathway has to do with your attachment style. Now, I'm not going to go into it in this video, but your attachment style really does, I think, start to show in the way that this shadow manifests in your life. And this state of indifference, they say it's like better to love or hate something rather than be indifferent. I don't know where that quote comes from, but it's like that indifference is definitely not a state that you want to be living your life in. It's just, I'd rather love or hate something than be indifferent about it. Because at least there's passion in that. And there's just there's a beauty in passion, even though it can be dark too. So, this indifference, if I think about how it played out, it was probably, and again, it's not something to get rid of. This is something to embrace, because these can be, our shadows can be are our biggest teachers. They are our teachers. They help us avoid what we don't want, what we want to keep us in the highest vibrational state. And they help us in making choices and decisions, and help us in engaging and who we engage with and how we engage. And they just teach us about ourselves. So indifference is like, I know if I am in indifference, then I'm in my shadow frequency. And so the gift is versatility. Now, versatility is really about, it's about the mind, the heart, and the soul, the spiritual essence of who you are, all working together. And so this is my spiritual intelligence is really about, the pathway of love for me is making sure that I've really mastered the balance between my mind, my heart, and my soul, because that's love to me. Love is not indifference. If I'm in the shadow frequency of indifference, I'm not in my highest spiritual essence. I'm not in, and this is from conception to 7 years old. This is like your most childlike state. It is like your it is your childlike state. And so when you can master the mind, heart, and soul, for me, and I can love in that way where they're all working together harmoniously, then I've mastered love in my life, and not just for others, but in myself too. It's how I feel about myself and how I offer love and how I give love. So, that definitely there was indifference playing out, and it was probably a lot of defense mechanisms. But again, your shadows can really show you where your boundaries can be, or get to strengthen. And now the realization, this is also a really cool one, because the realization is like, it leads you to your core, and your core is preconception. It's actually your core sacred wound. And you'll probably never hear me say too much about woundedness, because I actually don't really believe it. I just don't like, not believe it. I don't like the word. I don't like word wound, because it kind of makes us feel like we're just wounded and we need to like patch up all these scars that we have. But the truth is, wounds just come from emotional repression. Like who you are when you're emotionally repressed and who you attract into your life and what you do, like because you're emotionally repressed, is vastly different than who you are when you're emotionally expressed, who you attract into your life, and what you create and the karma that you create. And so I don't believe that we're wounded beings at all. I believe that we create life. And this is, again, about taking radical responsibility. And, it's not bypassing the fact that some of us were victims. It's not bypassing trauma. It's not about that. It's really about seeing ourselves from a higher perspective rather than these wounded, helpless, victimized beings. It's about seeing ourselves as spiritual beings living in a body who have come here to learn certain things, share that with the world, live a fulfilling life, and then pass on. Like it can be really simple if we look at it that way. But when we are victims of our circumstances, of our emotions, we will see things from a very low perspective, a perspective that's not really serving us. But this core wound, it's like, as human beings, I think we all have a sacred wound that just like, it's like we were born into this world. Like, yes, we're perfect, we're pure. But it's like also this is really, and in the pearl sequence, you'll see this is the prosperity sequence, you'll see this is actually your vocation. And so this is actually probably my favorite sphere, because it's your core wound. It's like your sacred wound that every human being comes into this life with. It's like the original sin almost, that we come in with, that then becomes your vocation. It's what you come here to support people with, to help people with. It's what you're here to do. And again, this is for you to contemplate in your life, because, my core wound, this 39, it's very fiery. the shadow is provocation. Like, and it's not about me provoking other people, although I definitely have felt that way. My simple way of being sometimes really, really provokes people. And I've seen that reflected in my relationships in many ways. But really, the shadow of provocation is about life provoking me. It's a very fiery gate. I also think I think it's Scorpio or Leo. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look it up. It's a very, no, Scorpio, it's not Scorpio, it's a fiery one. Yeah, so it's like, and it's an energetic, it's all about dynamism. Dynamism, being dynamic in nature is like, I'm a manifesting generator. So I'm just like very dynamic. I'm very speedy. I'm very fast when I set my mind to do something. And the Siddhic state is actually liberation. Now, for how this old story played out in the shadow frequency was that I noticed that in my past, relationships, again, this is we're connected to the Venus relationships. Again, remember I said my friend balanced like my seriousness out because she was really funny. It really counteracted my shame. And so the line 3 was like, yeah, the humor really liberated me from the shame that I felt. But also the provocation was life constantly provoking me. And that was my core wound. I felt from the moment that I was born that life was provoking me to grow in some way. And it always kind of felt painful, I will say. My childhood was not, there were good moments, but there was a lot of trauma, physical, emotional. And so it just always felt like life was provoking me. And if I don't step into the gift city, if I don't activate my gift of dynamism, if I'm not moving, then I become utterly locked in my energetic way of being. And this is what happened to me in the corporate world, where when I'm locked, when I'm not dynamic, when I'm not trusting my gift of dynamism, then life starts to provoke me and I start to provoke everyone around me unconsciously. And it doesn't create the highest good of all. It doesn't put me in my gift of dynamism. So once we transform this core wound, now we're into the prosperity sequence. Now this is all about money. But I don't want people to, think like, oh, as soon as I activate my gifts, then all the money's going to come. It might. It might. It definitely will when you access the Siddhic states. But it's really something to contemplate. Because no matter where you are in your life right now, you can activate these gifts and these Siddhic energetic states. You don't have to be in the perfect job or the perfect business or whatever it is. But the vocation part is probably the most important, because your vocation is really what is the beginning of your prosperity. I don't think you'll probably ever reach the heights of like prosperity. You could probably reach heights of wealth without knowing your true vocation. You hear lots of people who are very wealthy but very miserable. But once you activate your vocation and really know what you're here to do and what gift you're here to give and how you're here to serve, then you've really activated prosperity for the highest good of all, for yourself and for the world around you. So your core wound then becomes your vocation, what you're here to do. It's kind of like almost like your soul, your negative soul imprint. Interestingly, my negative soul imprint is one of powerlessness. I always kind of felt powerless to my situation. I wanted so badly to be free, like liberated, just in my expression, in my way of being, in my way of doing. And I always kind of felt powerless. And that was like that. And so that powerlessness caused me to provoke my relationships, caused me to provoke things, caused me to choose probably certain pathways that weren't allowing me to offer my gifts of dynamism. And so it all kind of ends up, yeah, like the core wound turns into what you're here to do, but you've got to be attuned enough. You've got to be listening to all the lessons that you've learned along the way in order to activate the highest acidic state of liberation. And so when I'm in my liberated state, this is when, and this is, it's funny because most people spend their whole life trying to liberate themselves from money, from their emotions, from toxic relationships, from, trying to find their purpose. They're like just trying to be free from all of these constraints and constrictions that we feel in life sometimes, all these limits. But it's like, actually, when I operate, when my state of being is liberated in my acidic state, then this is my journey. Yours will be different for your gene kit, for your pathway. But then I initiate. So the initiative is also, it's probably the same importance of like the challenge on your activation sequence and your intelligence on your Venus sequence. These three, and the initiative in your Pearl, these three pathways will be the greatest unlockers. You'll see probably the greatest shifts in your external experience, I would say, how you experience life and what manifests. But the Pearl is really about taking action. It is about initiation into your vocation. So vocation, mine is, from this liberated state, I'm now taking initiative to go on an adventure. Now, your culture is really about, if we talk in terms of business, it's about your fractal line. It's about you connecting with your soul family, people who are here to also, who you could probably support or lead or guide in some way, shape, or form, who are, you may be a little bit further along. But there's just this natural resonance, and there's this, like, you just naturally attract your fractal line, your soul family, your people who need you. So this is your culture. And when you can really start to do that, and I'm like, yeah, man, like if you're an ambitious person in terms of, I confused ambition when I was younger. I confused my wanting to climb the corporate ladder for like, ambition in terms of material wealth, but actually that is more related to gene key 54. Gene key 54, now my partner has gene key 54. He's very ambitious in a material sense, but that wasn't my driver. Money was actually never my driver. Even when I was in corporate world, I was hungry for rapture. I was hungry for being excited. I was hungry for adventure. I traveled a lot in my 20s. And so I actually, that is what I was hungry for. And although a lot of shame came from that too, but I had to unravel the story. I had to really unravel the shadow story of like hunger being a bad thing. I was like, because hunger can also quickly turn into like this addictive state, again, that keeps us in these shadow frequencies. And then we're not looking at it from a perspective of like, no, I actually just desire adventure. Like adventure is the gift that I'm here to give. And so my hunger for life experiences, for boundlessness is really about limitlessness. It's about me being unlimited in the way that I experience life, like not having limits. And in terms of business, if we're going to look at it in this business, like a coaching business is perfect for me because there are no limits. I can have location freedom. I can have financial freedom in terms of I can earn however much I want. I can, it's my business. Which can also lead to time freedom because now I'm no longer trading my time for money. I'm trading my value. So like, this is where I've ended up, but you can contemplate your culture in your own life, like, and who you're here to support, because like adventure is like, and limitlessness is really what activates my prosperity. When I feel like there's no ceiling, and that's what I really felt in my corporate role, was that there was just always this feeling of like limitedness. Like, it was like, yeah, well, this is your role. And unless someone ordains you and gives you a new title, then you ain't going nowhere. So chill. And I was like, my fiery, provocative self was like, I ain't chill. Like, I want to be moving. I want to be creating. I want to feel liberated. I want to feel limitless. And so, yeah, so this is how the shadow story plays out, right? And then again, it comes back to your life's work. Like, now the growth that I want to see really comes to how committed am I? And the story of half-heartedness. When I first started my coaching business, I went in with pure rapture and like desire for like, a six-figure business. But there were so many moments of half-heartedness. There were moments of like, do I really want this? It gets really hard. There was just wondering, questioning, feeling a bit of doubt, not fully feeling empowered again, not being fully committed or devoted. And now the reason why many of us don't ever step into these citic states of being, in the simplest form, it's about fear. Now, if we're making decisions from fear, like if I think about my relationship and how devoted I am to Paulie, there are many things that could have stopped us from being together, in terms of we lived in different states, his citizenship challenges, wondering, do we want the same future? Like, do we want to live in Fiji? Do we want to live in Australia? Like, there was a lot of things that could have made me go, like, cool, but I'm just not fully committed. But it's like, what are the fears there? Because I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of fear around security, right? And so this is where our lines come in. But when I devote myself and I'm like, and I know, me and my partner, like, we are like two peas in a pod. Like, you separate us and we're just not our best self. When we are together, we are just like our best self. Like, there's just this level of like soul connection that just makes you a better person. And like, you just can't be away from that. Like, no matter what the fear is. I was like, even if we had to, go to Fiji, live really poorly, and just live a completely different life than what I'm used to in Australia, I'm still devoted. Like, that level of like citic devotion, that level of commitment is where most people aren't willing to go. But, this is your journey. It's your pathway. It's your life, and it's your story. So you get to tell it any way that you want. But this is just a guide for you to see where you may be living out certain stories that aren't necessarily creating the limitlessness or the experiences that you want. So this is where the growth happens. This is like, oof, I'm going from fear to love. This is really growing me. And then the same with this side, the service is really about, it is about service. Like, how are you serving in the world? For a lot of people, if they have a 4 line, so 4 is all about community, and you'll see a lot of people like Gene Keys, Richard Rudd, he has 64.4, I think. And 4 is all about community, and he's built this like vibrant, beautiful Gene Keys community. And I'm just like so grateful for. And he's really in his life's work, and he's really serving from that 4 line of community space. And whatever his vocation is. But for me, as a 1 line, mine is really about security and safety. And actually, 1 lines are entrepreneurs. They're really here to create something that's never been created before. And so it's being totally devoted to that path. But again, don't let this limit you. It doesn't have to be like, you could say a coaching business is not as secure as like an insurance business. But at the end of the day, people always need coaching. People are always going to need, certain things. So it's like, this is all things to contemplate in your life. I also have a cleaning business, to support me while I build my coaching business. So that could also be another thing but for me, in order for me to go to corporate, earning a 6-figure career, to then, doing cleaning part-time, to really activate my highest potential in life, again, the biggest breakthrough, because I cared so much what other people think. This is how this all tells a story. And so the quantum, I love this. I call this the quantum leap, because, all of this working in harmony together then creates your pearl. And your pearl is what creates the quantum leap, because it's like, if you can embody your highest essence, your acidic state. So mine is fluorescence. It's like a flowering of my beingness. Like 15 in Gene Keys and in Human Design is called the wild heart, which is like so me. It's just like, it is like a love of humanity, period, point blank. And so when I'm in the shadow frequency of that, it's just there's a dullness. It's just like life is dull. There's really, if I think about, like I'm that dullness is like, I'm not magnetic. There's just like, again, it's connected. Like, are you growing? Are you in your gift frequency? Are you in your shadow frequency? This is how they all connect. Because like, if you're not growing, if you're not serving, then you cannot access the quantum. So I cannot be magnetic if I'm not committed, if I'm not initiating myself in this dynamic state. I'm not seeking adventures, or I'm turning my hunger into adventure. And guys, your shadow frequencies can really keep you in places that are really unfulfilling. They alter your whole destiny. And so this is the thing. This is about unlocking the higher purpose of your DNA. It's unlocking. It's not just about be high vibe and high frequency. It's not about that. It's about all the choices you're making along the way. It's about how you're living your life. It's about seeing it from a different perspective. Like, all the travel that I did in my 20s. At the time, I was so disassociated. I was so desperate for some kind of spiritual experience to probably save me in a way, that, I didn't see it as an adventure. Actually, well, there were some moments, yes, but it was really a hunger. I wasn't going into it consciously. Everything that I was doing was unconscious. And again, that led to some challenging moments of like me thinking, oh my God, like I traveled so much, I didn't really think about my future. And I wasn't going through life in a very mature way. I was very immature. And so when I see now my life as an adventure, this is where I start to mature in my responsibility of life. And it's like, I can still go on adventures, but I enter the decision from a more mature, responsible place. So that's, and then it's like how committed, and then the growth. So if I'm growing and I'm serving, now I can really activate the pearl, which is just like the quantum leap. It's the quantum leap, y'all. And you really, I'm like flowering, I'm becoming, and I'm just loving. It's like the wild heart, like. So I'll leave it there, guys. It's because it's just like I could be here forever. But I hope that sheds some light on how these pathways can tell a story in your life. And I want you to contemplate your own life. And if you would like to, because I know if you don't know anything about Gene Keys, you just might be overwhelmed. Like, okay, now I have to get to know every single Gene Key. I would love to support you on that journey. So I'm going to leave a link to the Human Design and Gene Keys readings that I have done in the past for many, many people. You can see on my Instagram, they are called dream activation sessions. Now, these are just one-off sessions. I don't have a large group program that I'm running at the moment, but I really do prefer working one-on-one with people. So if you would like your own kind of reading or understanding of your gene keys, and you are on a journey of like wanting to change your story, then this might be a beautiful place to start. So I'll leave the links below for you to be able to connect with me. And I really hope that this was helpful. And thank you for being here. Thank you for watching to the end and I hope you found heaps of value here. Okay, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.